This is Aiden Eyakuze, and I shall be your moderator. Quick introduction, I'm Executive Director at Unaweza, East Africa, so there's lots of friends in the room. It's nice to see you. And we have our chief guest here, Dr. Sanga, who is a Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Water, Republic of Tanzania. Our host, Mr. Nathan, Country Director of the World Bank. And I'm going to invite you to really have an engaging conversation. And I'll start with a bit of a personal experience just yesterday and today. I'm having water problems at home. That big rain shorted my pumps, and so now water is not coming into the house, and this morning I had to take what my wife calls a cuckoo bath, you know, a bucket in the bathroom with splashing yourself on, you know, so that I could be presentable for this. So this is close to me today. I hope to fix all the pumps and everything else in a few days. But for many Tanzanians, that is a daily reality. It's a daily reality. Having access to good, clean, safe water and sanitation and hygiene services is a struggle. And this report shows us how much of a struggle it is. And just to entice you to read the report, which I did from cover to cover, $2.4 billion. $2.4 billion is what we lose every year because of inadequate water, sanitation, and health services in this country. $2.4 billion, 5.6 trillion shillings. That's a good quarter, slightly less than a quarter of our annual budget. 33 million. These are the number of school days lost because children are sick. And they're mostly sick because of waterborne diseases or the lack of adequate water, sanitation, and hygiene services. 31,000 deaths happened prematurely in this country, again because of inadequate wash services. 10% of the premature deaths in Tanzania are because of inadequate wash. So the cost is enormous, not just in numbers, GDP, lost opportunity, but lives which are cut short unnecessarily and lives which are made difficult, drudgery unnecessarily. The amount of water that is carried over between 10 and 2 kilometers that people have to go and fetch, mostly women go and fetch this water, has other skeletal muscular challenges for them. So you can see water is at the core of quality of life. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I'll stop rambling about my own problems and invite immediately the country director for Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe at the World Bank, Mr. Nathan Belete. Welcome.
Good morning, habari ya asubuhi. Honorable Chief Guest, Anthony Sanga, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Water, senior government officials, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, esteemed panelists, representatives of the diplomatic corps and development partners, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It's a real honor and pleasure for me to welcome you all to the launch of this 18th edition of the Tanzania Economic Update. As some of you may know, the TEU is a biannual report that examines the country's recent economic performance and the array of risks, challenges, and opportunities that it faces. Each edition of the TEU also has a special focus on an issue of strategic importance to the country. Most recently, we've had issues that focused on issues such as Tanzania's transition in the critical tourism sector, the role of women and women's empowerment, as well as investing in Tanzania's digital economy. This latest issue of the TEU focuses on the subject of WASH, water supply, sanitation, hygiene, as a report titled Clean Water, Bright Future, the Transformative Impact of Investing in WASH. Before going into the details, Honorable Chief Guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by reflecting on some of the highlights of the first part of the report on the macroeconomic picture for Tanzania. This update, as we all know, is coming at an especially complex and challenging time for the global economy, as the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic continue to roil global supply chains. The war in Ukraine has further destabilized commodity markets, creating major headwinds for developing and emerging economies. Rising prices for food and fuel have driven inflationary cycles in all economies alike, while aggressive monetary tightening is expected to push the aggregate investment below its average for the last 2 decades. Global growth is projected to slow sharply this year to its 3rd weakest pace in nearly 3 decades, and any further shocks could push the economy into recession. In an uncertain environment marked by elevated downside risks, developing countries like Tanzania may rely on structural reforms to bolster their external resilience. The World Bank Group has continued to act with urgency in supporting countries as they confront these overlapping crises with financing, policy, and knowledge. Our $170 billion in crisis response package for the 15-month period ending in June 2023 is largely aimed at exactly this: global public goods such as climate change, food security, and health preparedness. As observed, thanks to its strong macroeconomic fundamentals, Tanzania was only one of the few countries in the region to emerge with from the pandemic without having experienced economic contraction. The government should be commended on its robust fiscal response, which included direct cash transfer designed to safeguard household consumption, as well as its appropriately accommodative monetary policy. However, the post-pandemic recovery remains slow and growth is lagging its long-run potential. Poverty rates have largely been stagnant prior to the COVID shock. Moreover, the pandemic and rapid population growth have greatly increased the size of the poor population, which will adversely affect the already low productivity growth for years to come. While the government has maintained an impressive commitment to fiscal discipline in the face of mounting demands to increase spending, ensuring adequate resources for priority social spending remains critical. The government also needs to be commended on maintaining modest debt levels, a considerable achievement given the extraordinary shocks the country has experienced over the past several years. The latest IMF World Bank assessment puts Tanzania at moderate risk of debt distress. But safeguarding debt sustainability over the medium term requires a combination of prudent borrowing, improved revenue mobilization, and careful and transparent debt management. Proactive efforts to keep debt levels manageable will be particularly important as the government implements its ambitious investment program. GDP growth is projected to pick up in 2023, but growth is expected to remain modest as the economy continues facing spillovers from the war in Ukraine. Advancing the authorities' structural reforms at this stage remains essential. Furthermore, timely and efficient implementation of flagship capital projects combined with measures to improve the business climate and could enable Tanzania's economy to reach its potential growth rate over the medium term. While Tanzania's outlook is broadly positive, climate change continues to pose a major threat to its social and economic development. Agriculture and tourism, which employ a large share of the country's labor force, are especially sensitive to extreme weather events and therefore require concerted attention. Which brings me to the second part of this TEU on the role that WASH plays in transforming a generation. Water, sanitation, hygiene services play a vital role in poverty reduction and economic growth. Achieving universal WASH is crucial to achieving Tanzania's objectives for education, health outcomes, economic growth, poverty reduction, and environmental resilience, among others. We are very encouraged by the government's vision and renewed commitment to WASH as seen through its current 3rd phase of the Water Sector Development Program, whose goal is to achieve near universal access to WASH for all. The WSDP3, which is by far the most ambitious phase with a financing requirement estimated at $6.5 billion, of which $4.1 billion will be required to ensure that every Tanzanian has access to safe drinking water to be freed from the burden of illness caused by inadequate sanitation and hygiene. The World Bank has committed $875 million to the sector, which includes the recently approved $300 million additional financing for the Sustainable Rural Water Supply and Sanitation Program, which we hope to sign tomorrow. The program has been highly successful and impactful in transforming wash access in rural sectors, with results to date showing that more than 3.3 million people gained access to improved water supply, about 4.67 million people gained access to improved sanitation, about 246 villages achieved and sustained community-wide sanitation, about over 1,500 healthcare facilities were provided with improved wash services. 637 primary schools gained access to improved sanitation and hygiene facilities. We are very encouraged by these results, and I would also like to congratulate the government, especially the implementing ministries, water, health, education, and the PRLG, who have worked hard to ensure its success. Yet, there is so much more that Tanzania stands to gain, as our report shows, on top of these impressive gains. If Tanzania achieved near universal coverage of wash service per its WSDP3 goals, it would save an estimated $2.4 billion each year, or 3.2% of its GDP, which is what inadequate services are currently costing the country. This amounts to about 88,000 Tanzania shillings per person. Death and disease remain the most direct and quantifiable impacts of inadequate wash, especially for children. Better wash services would save an estimated 10% of preventable diseases. Better wash access would greatly improve Tanzania's human capital, as it is well known that wash plays a critical role in childhood nutrition, which impacts children's physical health and brain development. It also has an impact on educational attainment as a result of sickness. Better wash can bring economic benefits not only through avoiding those losses, but also through generating employment, supporting livelihoods that depend on reliable water supply, and creating demand for products and services. The devastating consequences of inadequate access versus the benefits gained by such investments are highly cost-effective. The report shows that providing near universal wash access, as envisaged in the WSDP3, would cost the government just $16 per capita, which is less than the $38 per capita that inadequate wash services cost Tanzania each year. To achieve sustainable and universal wash access in Tanzania, a combination of policy measures, institutional capacity building, and new financial arrangements at the national, subnational, and community levels are going to be needed. In executing the WSDP3, it is important to have robust planning processes to identify wash services that deliver value for money and are sustainable. A strong regulatory framework with well-designed incentives for the private sector participation, financing, sound management across the investment cycle, and reliable mechanism for ensuring financial transparency and accountability will be crucial as well. Finally, robust data collection will be necessary to gauge progress and inform future policies that will be critical. In closing, let me reiterate the commitment of the World Bank Group to partner with the government and all our development partners and stakeholders in the advancement of this critical and urgent agenda in Tanzania. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nathan Belete, for your summary. We're going to get into some details, I think, from some of your colleagues. But right now, it gives me great pleasure, and it's a great honor to invite to give us his remarks our chief guest, and that is engineer Anthony Sanga. And one thing I like about Mr. Anthony Sanga, he doesn't know this, is that I was born in Mwanza. So he has been managing the Water Supply and Sanitation Authority for 7 years before he became Deputy PS in Ministry of Water, and now he is the PS, and you have this big job ahead of you of making sure we're all washed and clean and healthy, right? Engineer Sanga, karibu sana.
Thank you very much, distinguished leaders, development partners, ladies and gentlemen, members of press, habari za asubuhi, good morning. Dear participants, the government of Tanzania through the Ministry of Water is happy to be part of the launch of the 18th edition of Tanzania Economic Update, whose special theme or special focus is in WASH. The government recognizes that water is one of the fundamental resources for human, social, and economic development. Is the ministry directly responsible for water supply and sanitation? We are very welcoming the opportunity that this event presents for all our stakeholders, providers, researchers, and suppliers to contribute to a discussion on the work we do and how we can achieve even more impact. The government, in collaboration with development partners, non-state actors, communities, is implementing water supply and sanitation projects in rural urban areas to improve our people's access through Water Sector Development Program Phase 1, Water Sector Development Program Phase 2, and now Water Sector Development Program Phase 3. In the first and second phase of WSDP programs, we achieved cumulative improvement in water resources management, water supply services in rural and urban areas, and improved sanitation services. Under WSDP2, we had significant achievement as well. We are now in the WSDP3, which is ending around 2025, 2026. Distinguished participants, the Tanzanian National Development Vision 2025 has been implemented through various programs. The third phase and final phase of the National Development Plan is ending 2025-2026. It recognizes the importance of water, sanitation, and hygiene to achieve the social and economic development. The development plan has set targets which need to be achieved by 2026, which include ensuring that 95% of urban population have access to improved water services, and ensuring that 85% of rural population has access to improved water services when it reaches 2025-2026. To achieve these targets and others on sanitation, on July 2022, the government of Tanzania launched the third phase of the Water Sector Development Program, Phase 3. The overall program objective is to strengthen sector institutions for integrated water resources management and increase the access to water supply, sanitation, and hygiene services. Water Sector Development Program Phase 3 is our most ambitious phase, which needs about 6.5 billion US dollar, equivalent to Tanzanian shillings 15 trillion, to achieve its objective and targets. Therefore, as we have most of our key stakeholders here, in your different capacities, I call upon you to join hands with us and support the initiatives and interventions which have outlined in the Water Sector Development 3. It is ambitious because it is important and it recognizes all WASH goals stipulated in SDG 6. Distinguished guests, we also take this opportunity to extend our sincere appreciation for the support we are getting from our development partners, including the World Bank. We are happy with the transformative changes we are witnessing in our rural areas through the Sustainable Rural Water Supply and Sanitation Program for Results. This is famous, known P4R, or Program for Results, whereby the payment is done after we have recognized or we have witnessed the results. We have achieved commendable results and improvements in regard to access to water supply improvement, sanitation improvement as well, and hygiene in rural areas. The numbers have been quite impressive and extremely encouraging, but we are well aware that there is more that need to be done. That is why the government is also grateful for the recent addition of $300 million through the same program, as I said before, the Program for Results. This Program for Results, the first tranche was about $350 million, which is the last disbursement will be done maybe in March or April. And through the good result we've got through this program, the World Bank will make additional financing of about $300 million, which probably will be signed tomorrow or any time. But this is confirmed and it is being given following the good result we got from the previous program. So on that note, we thank the World Bank for that consideration. But also it should be known that this is the result of a good engagement between our development partners and the sixth phase government under the capable leadership of Her Excellency President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, the President of the United Republic of Tanzania. Indeed, I welcome you all to join with us in pursuing our ambition of achieving WASH for all Tanzanians. I look forward to a constructive and informative discussion on how we can drive this agenda forward through the country director who is here, the World Bank team. I really appreciate for the support you have given us as the Minister of Water in Tanzania, and we are realizing tremendous achievement, especially when we talk of the rural water access to the citizens of Tanzania. Thank you very much also for the commitment of $300 million as an additional financing, as you committed yourself. And we wish that tomorrow probably we are going to sign this additional tranche. Thank you very much for listening. Asanteni sana. Welcome you all, for those who have traveled all a long way to Tanzania. Asante sana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Sanga. And it's great to see that programs for results lead to really important results. And as a result, sorry, too many results. We have additional support to make sure that 6 million more Tanzanians will have access to better or improved water, sanitation, and hygiene services. So let's dive into a little bit of detail. The next element of our conversation, we're talking to you at the moment, but then we'll get a chance to get your feedback, is to find out the context within which this entire WASH initiative is happening, and that is economic developments in Tanzania. How are we doing? How are we faring? What are the prospects for our economic growth in the short and medium term? That one will be presented to us by senior country economist from the World Bank, Dr. Sadia Refakat. Dr. Sadia, are you ready? There you are. Welcome. And I think we're going to put our attention to the screens in front of us here. After Dr. Sadia, we shall have a special TED Talk. A special TED Talk on water. And this will be delivered by Dr. Ruth Kennedy Walker, who's the Senior Water Supply and Sanitation Specialist from the World Bank. So first, we start with it's good to have people who remind you what you've forgotten. I overstepped a very important moment, and that is the launching of the report itself. So I think I'm going to invite Nathan and Engineer Sanga, I think. Is that right, Loy? Yes? Do come over here, I think. And I would like to have, I would like Dr. Ruth, I think, also to come. And Dr. Sadia. Otherwise, we shall have a small gender problem. So please welcome. There are some reports and some ribbons to be cut. Come all the way to the center. I'm just the noisemaker on the side. And can I ask, will the other reports be circulated on the tables as they are cutting? Or just after? Or way after, at the very end? After? Okay, so please come. They're eager to unveil this report. There you go. And Ruth, you should hold it. This is your work. You cannot deny it now. There we go. And TEU number 18 is officially launched. And I really must recommend the good work. I did read it from cover to cover this weekend. And I think you will find a lot in there that is fantastic to find out, the challenges that are there, but also the opportunities for really making a difference in fundamental lives and quality of life of Tanzanians. Thank you very much. And so now, Dr. Sadia, I'm going to leave the floor to you. Welcome, Dr. Sadia.
Habari ya asubuhi. Jina langu ni Dr. Sadia. Mimi ni mchumi. Ninafanya kazi Benki ya Dunia. Karibuni. So for translation, and that's the only words I know, extremely pleased to be here. My name is Dr. Sadia Refakat. I'm economist with the World Bank, and it's a privilege to be with all of you here today to present this work for the World Bank and my own team. I have a short presentation, and it's going to be very visual. The point for us here is to take you with the journey through the data, because the data speaks 1,000 words than the words that we say ourselves. So I'm going to let the data speak a lot of it. One thing that I do want to talk about is that, as Nathan also alluded to this one, that we are living in a heightened crisis time at this particular moment as far as the global economy is concerned. So the global headwinds are severe. And this you can see, for example, if you just look at the World Bank own flagship projections for the global world, which comes twice in a year, June and January. So I'm talking about the global economic prospects. And basically, we look at our own projection for the global world. You can see that they have been significantly downsized, okay? So for the global world, we are looking for the 2023 almost a downgrade of 130 basis point for global growth. There is a catch-up that is happening in 2024, but still the catch-up remains 30 basis point lower compared to the June 2022 JEP projection. If you look at across the different regions, there is a different spectrum of downgrade you're seeing. For example, if you just look at the advanced economies, we are talking about almost more than 170 basis point downgrade in their growth projection for 2023. So that is quite significant. If I go to the emerging market and developing economies, EMDEs, we are talking about a 80 basis point lower growth compared to a June 22 projection. So, and if we are, the region where we are seeing least downgrade is the African region, but the headwinds are still creating a huge impact in terms of livelihood and the achievement that were completed before the two shocks hit the global world. I want to move to the second global economic reality that we are facing at this moment, and that is global inflation. Every country in the world is facing a challenge of inflation. And this, even if I don't say anything, and you just look at my graph, which has the red bars and the blue bars, I don't have to tell you that in this picture, you're seeing almost a doubling of global headline inflation in most regions, okay? If I just look at that 100% increase, so also let me tell you that the blue bar is basically 2019 average, the green bar are representing the average for 2022. So we have an increase of 100% in the headline inflation for the world. If I look at the advanced economies, we have an increase of 300 basis points. If I move forward and I go to the EMDEs and I go to the Africa region, we have an increase in these 3 years of something like 50 to 70% that has happened between 2019 and 2020. What has that prompted the central banks to react to? And that you can see on my other figure. What we are seeing is, since the start of 2022, a combined monetary tightening that is happening across the world. So you see the red lines and the higher blip, and that's the monetary tightening by the central banks in terms of the policy rates that has increased. This has a significant impact on the global financial conditions, which is also experiencing a tightening. The third global fact that I do want to move to here is basically 2020 saw an exceptional increase in the global commodity prices. And that you can see from the line chart that I have here. And if you look at the two lines that are the yellow line and the blue line, so the yellow one represents the index for fertilizer, and the blue line represents the index for commodity prices. And you look at the increase, we are talking about an increase during 2022 from 100% to 275 to 300% for increase in that index. Why does that matter? It matters because to the countries which are the importers of those commodities, it matters tremendously. So even though recently we are seeing the global commodity prices coming down, but that's a very recent phenomena. The fourth factor that I do want to talk about here very quickly is the global investors' sentiment, and that you can see from the Syntax index. It dipped sharply down during the COVID time, as you can see from the 3 lines that I have here. It came up before the war in Ukraine, and since the start of the war in Ukraine, that sentiment of investment has gone down in the negative again, and still is in negative. So 4 facts are basically creating a headwinds for most of the countries in the world, particularly the countries which are importers. So that is that's the condition that we are at the moment. So how do we move from the global to local, right? So we move to the local environment and we see, okay, so how did Tanzania fare? Tanzania fared quite well. Despite the COVID shock, we saw a recovery in growth during 2021. And then during the 2022, we see another moderated recovery on top of it. And according to our own estimates, that is around 4.6% growth for 2020. Where is this growth coming from? So you can look at the demand side, you can look at the supply side. On the demand side, it's being driven by consumption as well as investment. On the supply side, the key drivers continue to be the industrial sector and the services sector. But mind you, I think also Nathan talked about this one, that the growth is slowing down and it still remains well below the long-term potential for Tanzania, which is around 6 to 7%. And that's an important point to keep in mind. The second point I want to make here is that inflation in Tanzania, and where are we in terms of inflation? I just talked about most countries in the world being hit by that. And this is the picture of the CPI headline inflation that you see here. It has remained modest, but this is not to say that the inflation had not increased. In fact, if you just look at this graph and you look at January 2022 and you look at December 2022, we are almost talking about an increase from 4.3% to 4.9% in the headline inflation. This has taken the average for 2022 to 4.4% inflation. Okay, that's fine. So what are the drivers? And the drivers are given in the colors, right? 65% of the driver remains the food inflation for Tanzania. The second one remains the transport with the second share coming. Together, these in the CPI basket for Tanzania constitute around 40–45% share. So the impact is still there even though the inflation remains modest, and also because you have the poor household who on average spend much more of their budget on the food items. So the hit is going to be there. In the relative prospect, right? Relative prospect is I've plotted almost, if I can count from there, 135 countries there, the 135 countries. And Tanzania remains in the lower tail of that countries, right? So if you just look at the average, you have the developed economies at 7%, then you have the regional African economies around 10.8%, and then you have the EMDs around 12.2%. So this is what it's coming, this is the picture, and this is all the average for 2022. The third key macro factor that I want to move quickly is the impact on the external sector, because it goes to the first part that I talked about in terms of the commodity prices and the external sector. Two positives. Export has rebounded for Tanzania, and now we are seeing a double-digit exports. Second, the tourism has rebounded for Tanzania. Just few numbers, and this you can see from this one. Take a pre-COVID month, right? So we go to January 2019. Tourism arrival, 137,000. Now, December 2022, where are we? We are almost at 157,000. So we are doing better than the pre-COVID time. Tourism receipts, so people are coming, are spending. The tourism receipts, January 2019, the number was around $205 million. So the quarter average latest that the data we have, we are talking about a $250+ million average in tourism receipts. One thing has changed, that the composition of tourists is very different from what we were seeing prior to the COVID shock and the slowdown in the global world. The other main factor is in the middle figure, and there you can see the yellow line going up, which is the trade deficit for Tanzania. And this is in the units, right? And you can see this going up. And the up is as a result of the one commodity price increase I talked about earlier in my presentation, because Tanzania is an importer for commodities. And the other factor being the domestic demand, which is also driving the increase for demand for imports. So what's happening to the current account? The third figure I have there. In the H1 2022 current account deficit for Tanzania almost doubled compared to a H1 2021. So this is something that does need attention and does need to be watched for. Let me move to my next point on the presentation, which is on the fiscal side. So the fiscal remains well anchored. FY 21-22, we are talking about the Tanzania mainland deficit of around 3.5, 3.6% of GDP, right? And if you look at the total spending, we are seeing almost similar trend, 19 to 20% of GDP, almost equally divided between the recurrent and the development spending. Tax to GDP ratio of around 12%, similar to the pre-COVID levels. However, this tax to GDP ratio places Tanzania just above the average of lower income countries. Is that enough in terms of the ambition that we want to set us up for? It is not, and the reason for that is that the fiscal space requires, in the light of the upcoming large capital investment, it also requires parallel investment on human capital to drive productivity and potential growth. And this, incidentally, is also the next watch this space ad for the next TEU, which is based on the fiscal public expenditure review for Tanzania, and will discuss the issue of domestic resource mobilization as well as efficiency of spending. I want to move back to the previous slide which I had, and this before I go to the outlook, and I hope I can in this with this clicker. And that was, just let me continue on the debt to GDP ratio. So Tanzania debt to GDP ratio, where did that remain? We are talking FY 21-22, around 42% debt to GDP ratio. So there is a little bit uptake, but it's not that significant or not that large compared to the other countries in terms of debt increase that they are seeing. And this, as a result, the latest World Bank and IMF debt sustainability analysis places Tanzania on a moderate risk of debt distress. I have also done the same thing. The relative is very important for anchoring what we are talking about. On your other side, which is here, you have a 177 countries data, okay, on public debt. On the vertical axis is the 2019 public debt. On the horizontal axis, you have 2022 average of public debt. And then I have a 45-degree line which is dividing. So all the countries which are falling under the 45-degree lines are the countries which between 2019 and 2020 registered a significant increase in debt. What happened here? Do you know how many in the sample registered an increase? 2/3 countries registered an increase. And you can see that from here as well, that all of your balloons are falling, and on that side, and they're also lower. Tanzania relatively remained on the 45-degree line despite the shocks that we are talking about. And I also wanted to, the reason for talking about them was because these are the major shocks. So this is important. I move to my almost, I think, the last slide in terms of the outlook for Tanzania. We are expecting the growth to increase in the 2023, but we are still expecting growth to remain below the potential for Tanzania. And that the reason for is one of that we saw this year was a severe drought, and the other, the external headwinds that I just talked about. So the outlook has a significant downside risk at the moment. We do expect the inflation to taper down in 2023 as the commodity prices after peaking are now coming down. So that will have an impact on that. The number I have here is our projection number, which is higher than the average that actually Tanzania saw for 2022, because I talked about a 4.4%, not the 5.2%. In terms of the fiscal consolidation, we do expect a continuation of the fiscal stance, and as a result, public debt to GDP remaining almost neutral. On the current account side, we do expect the pressure to remain there as a result of the factors, supply chain issues, low investment, the demand drop coming from the large countries and other factors. This takes me to the last point before I close, and this is going to be in a few statements. Growth itself is not enough, right? Growth is no miracle if it's just growth. The growth needs to be inclusive, growth needs to be resilient, and growth needs to be sustainable. And that's what I would like to leave you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Will you remember that? Growth needs to be what? Inclusive. Number 2? What's that? Resilient. And the third one? Very easy assignment. Now go and do it. Right? Everybody in the world is looking for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable growth. Let's see how water, sanitation, hygiene contributes to those 3 goals. And here I'd like to invite Ruth Kennedy Walker, who is a senior water supply and sanitation specialist, to give us a talk on clean water, bright future. What will it take? Ruth, welcome.
Zahanati yetu ya Itepula hii huwa haina choo kabisa. Tulikuwa tunatumia choo cha jirani ambacho ni choo cha serikali ya kijiji. Tulikuwa na changamoto kubwa ya maji. Changamoto hii tulikuwa tunategemea bomba la kijiji lililoko jirani. Bomba hili linatumiwa na kijiji kizima. Kwa tulikuwa nawahi kazini asubuhi na mapema sana. Unawahi kupanga foleni ili niweze kupata maji ya kuja kutumia zahanati. Kwa hiyo ni changamoto moja kubwa ambayo iliniathiri mimi, nikawa nashindwa kutekeleza majukumu yangu kwa wakati. Na wakati mwingine maji yanapokosekana tulikuwa tunatafuta hata ya visima, maji yanayochimbwa kwenye mashimo, maji ya kisimani tulikuwa tunatumia. Magonjwa hasa ya kuhara, magonjwa ya typhoid yalikuwa yanaongoza sana. Lakini baada ya mradi huu changamoto hii imetatuliwa kwa asilimia zote. Hata wagonjwa wanaofika OPD-ni nao waona kesi za kuharisha zimepungua kwa asilimia kubwa. Tunanawa mikono kama ninyi ndivyo mashahidi, mnaona kila mahali kuna sinki, kuna maji ya kunawa. Tukishahudumia mgonjwa tunanawa mikono, kabla hatujamhudumia tunanawa mikono. Tuna karo la kunawia nje, wagonjwa nao wananawa nje. Kwa hiyo imeleta hamasa kubwa kwa wakina mama. Wengi wameacha kujifungulia nyumbani, wanakimbia kujifungua zahanati.
It's a matter of life and death. 31,000 Tanzanians, like Dr. Navaka's patients, old and new, are estimated to be dying each year due to poor wash access. That is 10% of all preventable deaths that could be stopped by simply ensuring access to safe water, a toilet, and somewhere to wash your hands. Diseases related to poor wash are important contributors to premature death. 22% of 15-year-old Tanzanians that are 15-year-olds today will not live to experience their 60th birthday. Maternal sepsis results from unclean and prolonged delivery and significantly affects the health of the newborn child. As many as 3 in 4 delivery rooms in Tanzania are not what we call Watson safe. Studies show that maternal sepsis causes almost 1 in 5 maternal deaths. Inadequate wash also costs the economy. More than $2.4 billion each year in excess medical costs and lost productivity. This is equivalent to 3.2% of the 2022 Tanzania's gross domestic product. Guess who bears the heaviest toll? It's women, children, the poor, and the vulnerable. Inadequate wash especially hurts rural communities, which are already poorer than their urban counterparts. This is impinging on the government's ability to build an inclusive economy.
Hapo awali kabla ya programu hii kutufikia katika
Kulikuwa na vyoo vya shimo ambavyo vilikuwa sio rafiki kwa watoto na hasa watoto wa kike wakiwa katika hedhi. Lakini pia upatikanaji wa maji ulikuwa ni mgumu. Watoto walikuwa wakitafuta maji kwenye nyumba za walimu na sehemu jirani kwa ajili ya matumizi ya vyooni na matumizi mengine. Ilikuwa ni ngumu sana kwa watoto kuhudhuria siku zote 5 za shule. Unakuta saa nyingine mtoto amepotea, haonekani siku 2, 3, 4. Saa nyingine wiki nzima hayuko shule. Lakini kumbe mazingira hayampi yeye uhuru wa kukaa katika ile hali ya hedhi shuleni kwa sababu ya mazingira ya vyoo jinsi yalivyokuwa. Kunapata kesi nyingi sana za kuumwa tumbo, kuwashwa sehemu za siri, UTI sugu zilikuwa haziishi. Lakini baada ya mradi huu kwa kweli una manufaa katika shule yetu kwa sababu zile kesi za tumbo kuuma, UTI, sijui kuwashwa kule chini hatuzipati tena kwa sababu mazingira yamekuwa ni rafiki kwa watoto kujisitiri hata wakati wa hedhi. Akienda kule chooni anakuta kuna pedi zipo, kwa hiyo anaweza akabadilisha. Tunawaandaa watoto hata wale ambao bado hawajafikia kuvunja ungo, tunawapa elimu ya hedhi salama. Anakuwa tayari ana ufahamu wa kutosha kuhusiana na hedhi salama. Na hii pia imesababisha kiwango cha taaluma kupanda katika shule yetu kwa sababu muda mwingi wako darasani. Kwa hiyo tunashukuru sana mradi huu kutufikia katika shule yetu. Hapo awali kabla ya programu hii kutufikia katika shule yetu, tulikuwa na vyoo vya shimo ambavyo vilikuwa sio rafiki kwa watoto na hasa watoto wa kike wakiwa katika hedhi. Lakini pia upatikanaji wa maji ulikuwa
33 million school days each year. Would you go to school if there was no toilet, no privacy to manage your menstrual hygiene needs, or if you had acute bouts of diarrhea? I wouldn't. Limited proximity to shops that sell and the high cost of materials to safely manage menstrual hygiene management does not only affect girls in school, it affects every single menstruating woman in this country. 91% of shops in rural areas do not sell disposable menstrual hygiene pads. How are rural women meant to safely manage their menstrual hygiene needs? Deficiencies in wash access especially hurt the potential of Tanzania's youth. It is estimated that more than 50% of Tanzania's population is under 18 years old. Wash-related conditions and sickness cause cognitive deficiencies among children that permanently impair their capacity to learn, resulting in stunting and a permanent reduction in lifelong income. Many children who may be physically present in school suffer from wash-related sickness, which means they cannot concentrate, they cannot contribute, and they cannot learn. This means they ultimately cannot grow to their full potential. Our findings in this 18th Tanzania Economic Update show clearly that Tanzania can transform a generation by simply committing itself to WASH for all citizens. Tanzania has commendably raised its ambition and the scope of its commitment to expanding access to water supply, sanitation and hygiene, as it's been seen in its adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals and through the Water Sector Development Programme Phase 3. We can see from recent survey results, the commitment is starting to pay off. Despite this progress though, most of Tanzania's population lacks access to adequate wash services. More than 9% of the population, that is 5.6 million people, continue to practice open defecation, meaning they have no access to toilets at all, posing serious health risks. Climate change is also worsening wash-related risks, with increasing frequency and severity of droughts and floods for the region, leading to periodic reduction in water availability, a reduction in quality, and increased risk of waterborne diseases. It is clear more can be done, more needs to be done urgently, and more importantly, much more benefits can be reaped. What should Tanzania do to improve this situation and ensure universal wash access for all? A considerable upfront investment is needed. The Water Sector Development Programme Phase 3, which will help provide near universal wash access, puts the required investment at $4.1 billion out of the total $6.5 billion for the programme. Whilst this bill may appear steep, our findings show that it is in fact dwarfed by the benefits it will bring. It also shows more benefits will be reaped the quicker universal wash access can be achieved. Implementation of the Water Sector Development Programme Phase 3 could reduce Tanzania's economic losses by 1.9 billion each year by 2030. Within 5 years, these savings could generate benefits equal to the initial wash investment. This equates to an investment of just $16 per capita per year, which is less than half of the $38 per capita per year lack of access to adequate wash services cost Tanzania. Ladies and gentlemen, this seems obvious. It's simple maths.
Biashara zamani ilikuwa ni ngumu. Nilikuwa sina uwezo wa kuchota lita 20 za maji. Au lita 100. Ukichota lita 20 inabidi hizo lita 20 zifanyie kazi vizuri. Kwa sababu maji tulikuwa tunatoa ni mbali sana, sio kama hapa. Kwenye mashimo wanakochimba dhahabu ndio tulikuwa tunaenda kuomba maji masaa 4 kutoka kwangu mpaka kwenye mashimo. Na ukikuta wenzio wamewahi uweze kuyapata maji na vitu vile ya kusubiri. Maji tuliyotumia ilikuwa sio salama. Nazoa tu popote pale kwenye madimi wanaogea mle. Yaani wewe unafika tu unachota unaleta kwenye biashara zako. Na magonjwa yalikuwa yanaibuka kama magonjwa ya typhoid, vichocho watoto wanapata kwa sababu maji tulikuwa tunachota sio salama. Kwa sasa hivi kwa kweli mradi huu umenisaidia. Nilikuwa natumia hela nyingi kwa ajili ya kutafuta maji, kutafuta vibarua kunisaidia kazi, lakini hiyo kazi imeisha kwa sababu maji yapo karibu, napata maji karibu, napata vibarua kunisaidia kazi zangu. Huwezi kukuta watoto wetu wanaugua maradhi ya ovyo ovyo kwa ajili ya maji. Baada ya kuendesha mradi wangu kaenda vizuri, nifungua mashamba na eka 6, nalima makalanga na mahindi. Na yenyewe inaniongezea kipato, nikipata hela hapa kwenye mgahawa napeleka shambani na inanisaidia kusomesha watoto wangu chuo kikuu, mmoja yuko sekondari. Nijenga nyumba, mambo yanaenda vizuri. Na jamii yangu walionizunguka hapa waliotuzunguka kulingana na mradi huu tumefaidika kwa mambo mengi, sio kama zamani.
Also benefit the livelihoods of individual Tanzanians like Mama Janet. As a result of gaining access to wash, Janet is thriving more than ever before and is engaged in multiple business ventures. Just imagine if we only had 1 million more stories like Janet's. But that is not all. Analysis has shown there would be some 24,000 professional and permanent jobs up for grabs just from achieving universal access to wash. Improving the quality of wash services will have transformative impact on Tanzania's social and economic development. The case is clear. Universal wash access is crucial to achieving Tanzania's objectives for education, economic growth, social development, gender equality, poverty reduction, and environmental resilience. It is important for Tanzania to continue to step up its efforts in this direction. In this economic update, we share a combination of actions that include policy measures, institutional capacity building, and new financial arrangements at national, subnational, and local levels. Good progress has been made, but we all need to commit to doing more because, as you can all see, the benefits far outweigh the costs. Improving water supply, sanitation, and hygiene is a matter of life and death.
Wow, thank you very much, Ruth. And what I particularly appreciate, I don't know about the others, was to get the voices from outside these hallowed halls of ours. You know, like I can't remember the lady who, the nurse in the beginning, who says that she feels more confident that she can wash her hands and her colleagues can wash their hands in providing services. The mothers who go to the clinic feel much better knowing that they're going to get good, clean services. The lady who now has a farm, farming maize and peanuts, and has sent one child to university and another to secondary school because her business is doing better. Why? Because she's got clean water. You know, so this connection here between what seems to be something that we take for granted, those of us who have access to it, and how much difference it can make for those who don't have access to it and who actually achieve or have access to good water, good sanitation, good hygiene services, it can be really transformative, as the title of the report says. So now it's time to have a conversation with some panelists. I hope they're bringing some chairs over there. And I'd like to invite them to come up one after the other, and we shall have a conversation. No more long speeches. That okay? Are you all right? Do you want to stand up for like 30 seconds and make sure that the water inside your body flows a little bit? Huh? All right. So, and while you're standing, I'll invite the other ones who are standing with you to come up to be the panel. And I'll start with engineer Wilhelmina Malima. Are you here? There you are, ma'am. Karibu sana. And we'll put you right in the middle, right over there. Don't sit on the side, in the middle. Okay, I will put you right there in the center. There you go. Yeah, fantastic. And then I will next invite Dr. Ibrahim Kabole from Zanzibar. Karibu. And to join Dr. Ibrahim, we'll invite Mr. Rory Nightingale. And finally, we'll have Mr. Kaposo Boniface Mwambuli. Welcome. So the rest of you may take a seat. Please sit down. I hope there are microphones around, right? Brilliant. Hello. Oh, this is loud. So welcome. How are you finding things so far? Okay? Yes? Are you excited? This is all about water. And you're all passionate about water. Nice to have a forum to talk about water. Engineer Sanga, is Engineer Sanga still here? You're there. These are your stakeholders over here. Did you get their cards? You can ask them questions. Yes? All right. But I'll start by, I think I won't give too much introduction because they're in the papers that everybody has seen. But I want to ask you something a little bit, very briefly, a bit personal. Not dangerous, but a bit personal. I'll start with you, Engineer Wilhelmina. In this sector of water, what are you most passionate about? If you were to choose one thing that you're most passionate about in this water sector, what would it be? And the same for all of you. Let's start with you. You need a microphone. It's on.
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much. You have introduced me, I think. So I would go direct to the subject. Yeah, the sector, as I've worked quite for some times, and we had a struggle really to get sanitation in place. And I'm really happy now to see the investments come to sanitation. So this is quite a good thing to me.
Okay. Are you a fan of Nyumba Nicho?
Yes.
We shall talk about Nyumba Nicho in a moment, all right? Thank you. Dr. Ibrahim, what is the one thing that really you're passionate about in this sector?
Thank you very much. I'm really impressed to see the lady at the clinic talking very passionately about how water, sanitation, and hygiene has impacted positively on mothers, on the working environment for healthcare providers, and on patients. This is something actually, while working in the water sector, I thought it couldn't come through. I would like to thank all those who were in this struggle, and I think we are there. Dr. Sanga, most likely you are going to be a good example for other countries in the region. Water, sanitation, and hygiene for health, water, sanitation, and hygiene for our health facilities is really a mover for development. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Let me go to Rory on your side. You are in this interesting in-between space between an NGO and a not-for-profit. And a profit-making company. Why are you passionate about this particular space, especially in the water sector?
There we go. How's that? That's better. I was obviously asked to join the panel to represent the private sector aspects of WASH. So, not surprisingly, my answer will be very private sector focused. So, I think probably the biggest passion for me in respect to what we're trying to do is we would like to be able to demonstrate unequivocally that you can run rural water systems sustainably, that they can be commercially viable, not necessarily profitable, but they can be commercially viable, sustainable in the long term. And I think that's one of the challenges that institutions and regulators certainly across our part of the world, have struggled to demonstrate successfully on a consistent basis. So I think probably the biggest passion for me is in 10 years' time, I want to be able to demonstrate to everybody in this room that you can actually run a rural system commercially, sustainably, and that it can continue from there on after.
Wow, that would be fantastic, because I think one of the challenges that many water authorities face is actually collecting enough revenue to keep themselves going, to maintain the infrastructure, to expand services as populations are expanding and getting further. So you need to give us the magic formula for doing that, right? Make a note of it. We'll come to you. Bwana Mwambuli, what are you passionate about in this water sector? You got a big fat CV. One thing.
I think for me, I would say everything that I've mentioned. But
that's cheating.
But I feel I'm very passionate about the private sector. Individually, looking at how are they going to participate in this big cake. I joined from the private sector, getting into water some years ago, but I still feel the private sector is not yet there working in the sector. So I'm still passionate about it. I would like to see it happening.
You want more private sector in the water sector?
Yes.
There are those who would argue that they're just going to gouge, especially the poor and the vulnerable. They're going to charge them too much, provide less than good quality services. What is your response to those worries?
I think across the world, across all sectors, private sector is there. Because one of the most important things is food. But I don't see food being distributed or led by the government. If you want a human being to survive, give him food. But the private sector is leading that sector. I'll give you an example of one of the private sector whom people say you cannot survive in Tanzania without getting one product from him. This Azam. Yeah, at one point we used to look at ice cream as
a luxury.
A luxury, because we couldn't get it. The supply chain was poor. He innovated, and now you can get ice cream from all over the roads. You can get ice cream from the villages. Maybe you talk about regional areas. They have found a way of how do they refrigerate, keep it cool, that it can be transported to Mbeya. Even my region, even my own district, Kiera, they can get ice cream. But in the past, I used to travel all the way from Temeke to Posta here to get ice cream at Steers.
Now the ice cream looks for you in Temeke.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I feel the same can happen in the water sector.
I have a weird question to ask, a fundamental one, for anybody who's willing to respond to this one. With our population growing in Tanzania, with climate change, my question is this: do we have enough water? Who would like to
Let me have a crack at that.
have a crack at that? Do we have enough water?
Let me put my agricultural hat on, because obviously the agricultural sector is also a big consumer of water and is therefore competing for water with domestic use. The challenge that we have in terms of water, and specifically in terms of the changing climate, is our ability to store water. And obviously there are basically two fundamental sources of water: surface water and subterranean. Now, subterranean we have less influence over, because obviously those are natural passages from the water collection points. But surface water we have an enormous ability to influence. And from an agricultural perspective, I always refer back to a country like Zimbabwe as a classic example of a country that took a deliberate step to make water storage a priority from an agricultural perspective. You can't travel to any farm in Zimbabwe without tripping over at least one or two surface dams. And they were largely built through a combination of private sector, but supported by government initiatives to get those built. So with this changing climate that we're seeing, where particularly in this part of the world, we are seeing not necessarily a decrease in the annual rainfall. What we're seeing is a shortening, a tightening of the window during which that rainfall appears. It actually creates an opportunity for us, because a higher rainfall in a shorter period of time creates more surface runoff, which, if not managed, obviously can be detrimental through erosion, etc. But if you harness it, it creates an enormous opportunity to store water. And so I think in terms of a response to the question, I think I would throw the challenge back to the sort of national policymakers. We need to understand that the weather is changing, but it creates an opportunity for us. And if we can store more water, which, you know, the technology exists, we have more than adequate capacity from an engineering perspective in country, we should be able to mitigate against the risks of reducing water levels.
That's a good point. I don't know, Engineer Sanga, if you had any thoughts on that, and, you know, no pressure on you at all. But we do have, I think, under your ministry, a dam agency. I don't remember its name. And whether you think that such is an opportunity for Tanzania to really build more water storage facilities so that when the rain doesn't quite fall, people still don't run out of water. Engineer, a thought or two? Okay, a mic is coming to you. Sorry, I surprised the sound system.
No, thank you very much. I think that is very, very useful idea, because having water like surface runoff just going to the ocean is a big challenge we're having, because then we are having a seawater there. But if we store to have a fresh water, I think that is the priority we should focus as the country, and we are happy that this is what we are now going to do. We've got enough equipment now to construct larger dams that will store fresh water before it gets into seawater. Having that done, I think it will ensure enough water to our citizens. Thank you very much for that observation. Mm-hmm. The government is also focusing on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very, very good to know. Let me go to Engineer Wilhelmina. Mama, your passion is sanitation. We heard from the presentation and the report here that waterborne diseases, lack of sanitation, lack of hygiene, cast such a massive cost on the nation, but more importantly on the individual people, and especially women and young girls. Can you tell us about what you are trying to do? Give us some hope as to what can be done, what you're trying to do, what individuals can do, and what companies and the country can do to improve that situation.
Yeah, in this subject, actually we look, when we look on sanitation, we look at it different level. One, we have the sanitation at household level, that is at community, and we have at institutions where we look at the schools mostly and the healthcare facilities. And we are happy actually, and we appreciate the investment through the P4R that is done through the government, and we know many other partners are coming. The thing that we have currently, having the guidance by the government from the sector ministries, the guidelines on school wash, the guidelines on healthcare facility. Following those in our investment, I think will contribute in really reducing these risks we have, because we ensure that there is water, there is sanitation facilities, there is the disposal mechanism, because this is also one of the subjects that is challenging, the disposal in healthcare facilities, the waste management, also at schools. With the menstrual health and hygiene, we provide the service, you provide the toilet, water, the sanitary pads, for example. If you don't provide disposal mechanism, that would be also a question still. Right. So these are the things that we are also considering. To add into that is the education. Education on the uses of facilities. Because one of the big challenges also to sustain this is the operation and maintenance, but the bit of effective use of the facility, proper use of the facility. So education is very important for the facilities, especially at schools, on how better and effective use, proper use, so that we don't clog the facilities, because if the toilets are clogged, then I mean, it's a problem again. So we go back into OD, open defecation.
Yeah, let me ask on that particular one. It may or may not be true, but are there cultural impediments to stopping or slowing down or reducing the open defecation challenges? Are people saying, there's no way I'm a father of daughters, I'm going to use the same toilet as my daughters? What do you do about those cultural impediments to better use of hygiene and sanitation?
Yeah, it's true. There are those challenges from the cultural perspectives. Yeah, but this is done through the approaches we have. For example, using the community-led social sanitation, involving the beneficiaries themselves, engaging them in understanding and making decisions. So the approaches are driving to the changes, actually. If the people are involved themselves, they understand the effects, and they contribute to the changes themselves.
Thank you. Very important announcement I shall make at the end. Yeah. Dr. Ibrahim, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in your work in Zanzibar. I think you've worked mostly in Zanzibar, but maybe the mainland. So you can give us a bit of a comparison between the challenges that you see in Zanzibar, which appears to us smaller geographically, perhaps more densely populated. Is it the same challenges in Zanzibar as you'd find on the mainland, which is big geographically, more sparsely populated population distribution on this water and sanitation?
Thank you very much. Water sanitation and hygiene is a cross-cutting issue. Whether you are living in New York, you are in Zanzibar, or you are in somewhere in Tandale, somehow if you don't have fresh, clean water, you don't have a clean toilet, you don't have access and the knowledge on hand washing, the impact will be almost the same. Before I talk about the challenges, I just want to bring forward the opportunities. As you can clearly see, Tanzania mainland has had a huge opportunity since 2002 to develop a process of sector-wide planning, develop a process of review of the policies, and bringing together development partners who are really committed to work with the government. As part of my work in mainland for the last 10 years or so, I really appreciated the way the development partners work with the government, so much so that I reached a moment where I could not differentiate who is a government partner and who is a development partner, because planning is done together. There's a lot of transparency. There's a lot of monitoring which is done together. And whenever we used to face challenges, we didn't say this is because of World Bank or this is because of GIZ. We used to face it as stakeholders in the issue. So this is a big advantage that has come through, and that has clearly brought about the big results that we have seen in Tanzania mainland. I actually remember when sanitation and hygiene were out of the Ministry of Water as a mainstream. It It was almost impossible to convince the Minister of Health to have sanitation and hygiene in the water docket. But at the end of it all, we all realized for better monitoring, better resourcing, and overall support, we better have sanitation, hygiene, and water in one docket, supported by all ministries. And that was a fantastic decision, and it has yielded results. So I think this is something where I am now sitting, where I can see Zanzibar has an opportunity to learn from. Since this is one country, it's very easy for Engineer Sanga to be able to be in a position to get this as a best practice. Not only to Zanzibar, but I think in countries in the region. Tanzania has one of the best, most of the strong, organized, sector-wide approach towards planning, monitoring, and financing. The advantage on the other side of the sea, Zanzibar is small, Zanzibar is organized, and the population of Zanzibar is almost homogeneous, almost the same culture, so to say. So if you want to do something around the issues of universal coverage, for example, you can quickly come through with the results because of the size, because of the context, and because of the issues around government being much nearer to the lowest level of governance in the system. So I think if Engineer Sanga is able to support the thinking around this place with his counterpart in the Ministry of Health, in the Ministry of Water in Zanzibar, you are likely to export one of the best brands of a practice that is going to cause change. Last week, actually, we had a roundtable discussion with the donors around the same subject, and I believe we can take forward this very quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me go to Bwana Kaposo Mwambuli. How does you talked about the private sector, but people are still nervous about it. You can say they supply food, but people can be nervous about water as a human right, water as a means for improving equity. What are good private sector examples in the water sector that you can comment or quote about here in Tanzania or around the world that we should perhaps emulate and learn from, so that really people have access to water, access to good sanitation, access to hygiene services?
Thank you very much. Actually, there isn't one example from any other country apart from Tanzania itself. Because as I'm speaking, we have just finished a project which was through the Ministry of Health, implemented by private sector in a consortium. I think you're just talking about Nyumbani Choo.
Nyumbani Choo?
Yes.
So that's got the private sector hand in it?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Because the lead of that consortium was Innovex, Project Clear, who are private sector. The way they delivered it, they didn't leave a footprint, but actually they delivered services, they improved the management. The most important aspect which we need maybe from private sector is the management rigor.
But okay, this is interesting. I think many people don't know what Nyumbani Choo is about, right? So I think you should market it now. This is your chance. What was Nyumbani Choo? What was the aim to achieve? What did it aim to achieve, and what has been achieved?
We aimed to achieve, by then it was a result of around 200,000 people reaching with improved sanitation, according to FCDO. But
improved sanitation, I'm trying to break it down.
Yeah.
Meaning a toilet in the house.
Yes.
Okay.
An improved toilet in the house.
An improved toilet in the house.
Reaching about 2,000 villages. Mm-hmm. But actually what we got was like 7 million households.
7 million households.
Yes. No, 7 million like in population. And then we got from 40, that was 40% coverage of people having improved toilets, to 64, I think, coverage, which was like 7-fold of what we expected to achieve. And the other aspect which I was very much impressed was the way the whole organization managed to leverage existing structures. This project was implemented through the local government. The people who were in the forefront were the health officers. The only thing which changed is that at that moment, it wasn't like as usual. When you remember a health officer, you remember him when there's cholera.
Yes.
So we rode on the government initiative whereby they do cleanliness competition each year, and then they continued rewarding health officers. We just amplified that. And each and every health officer became so proud of his or her own job that they were the people on the front line. So the last line, the last mile was well managed from the ground. And the policy decisions made from the ministry above were easily streamlined and cascaded down the ground. Then we could see people improving their toilets. And the other aspect was how social marketing was used. Instead of going back to the villages telling people that you are open defecating, actually they were told that you are modern.
Oh, I see.
So if you go, everyone aspires to live a modern lifestyle. So living a modern lifestyle is not complete if you don't have a
toilet in the house.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you cannot go to people and tell them, no, you stop taking your kids to school, you build a toilet. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But actually, take your child to school, do some economic activity, but remember to have a toilet so that you have a complete modern lifestyle. And everybody bought into it.
Okay.
And as we were talking, villages up to now, they remember nyumba ni choo. If you go out in the villages, and usually my colleagues, when they come, maybe in town, those are come. It was a consortium. Some of the team members are from the UK. We use the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. So when they come, arrive at the airport, they get a taxi. So where are you going? Do you know nyumba ni choo? Everyone knows it.
I see.
So to me, it was like, last time I was working in the bank, we were told that there is no market for toilets. And really, there was no market. Because we used to make sungura. So you make sungura in Rufiji. These are concrete slabs for the toilets. You leave them there. You go back home. You come maybe after 1 year. They're there. They're not even stolen. So you wonder, these has been lying here. There's money in there, but they can't be stolen. But now people are spending money to buy a plastic toilet, spending money to build a toilet. Now, what if we went the other way around, as we did in the past? Because in the past, what we did is just we thought that people don't know how to build toilets. Right. Let's go and train people how to build toilets. So we trained them. We made casted slabs, but
they still didn't do it.
They never did it.
So the difference now is your behavior change, how you marketed it.
Yes.
Oh, so it's all in the marketing, is it?
That is marketing. That is private sector. That's how we leveraged the private sector way of doing things.
So instead of this, you tell them a modern life, a modern lifestyle, a modern house to which everybody aspires means you must have a toilet in the house.
That's it. Even the mode of communication, we use one of the popular radios where they usually go, crowds.
Yeah.
When you're talking about crowds,
that's where I
media, those are the people who are standard setters. So if you want to look at lifestyle or trends, you look out there. So, yeah.
Let me ask Rory. So you spoke about the sanitation side of things, and behavior change marketing is very interesting, just a smaller side. If you want your young men not to smoke, don't tell them about lung cancer. Tell them that the women won't kiss them. they won't smoke. Rory, so let's go to the supply side, not sanitation, but actual water, itself. And you are in this in-between. I want you to develop a little bit between how are you making it sustainable to provide rural water services? Because me, as a mere economist, some capitalist, I think you can never make money from this. So you can never make it sustainable. How are you at eWater managing this or demonstrating it?
That's a good question. So I think maybe probably helps if I describe eWater a little bit, just so that people understand it. So eWater is in the very fortunate position that it has relatively deep pockets in terms of financial sponsorship from its promoters, and their ambition is very much philanthropic. So what we're looking to do is to either rehabilitate or, in certain rural situations, actually install completely new systems. But we use the eWater developed Smart Tap, which is a prepaid community tap, using all the sort of modern technology that's available. So topping up using mobile money, obviously using the Internet of Things in terms of monitoring what's going on within the network, collecting all the data, and then obviously being able to use that data to understand how the system is performing. Now, what we are looking to try and do now is to use that technology and that model initially in pilot form, so going into existing communities where perhaps the Ruasa network is in need of refurbishment. We would look to refurbish that, and then we would look to run that network as a private water operator for a period of 10 years, and use that to collect the data around operating costs, maintenance costs, consumption habits. Obviously, we would be able to then partner with organizations to sort of drive the WASH message in terms of getting people to use the now available clean water, as opposed to some of the traditional water sources that they might have used, particularly during the rains. The rains is when people sort of default back to, it's easier, I'll go down to the pond and collect some from the pond. So the initiative is to try and use all the modern technology that's available to us to be able to collect the data, to minimize the challenges around non-revenue water, which of course is a big problem in the traditional cash-based systems that we have across the country, and to help define what is the real cost of operating a rural system, for example. Right. And obviously it does vary from system to system, but by and large, there are sort of standard infrastructure, boreholes, solar panels, storage tanks, pipes, taps. And what we're hoping to demonstrate is that if you can do this across a wide enough sample of villages, communities, we can actually help define what that real cost of delivering water is. Mm-hmm. Once we understand that, then obviously we need to benchmark that against what is it that community members can legitimately afford to pay for that service, and if that is, if that is well below what it actually costs to run, then collectively as stakeholders we need to figure out how do we subsidize those communities, how do we help provide the revenue that's required to legitimately run those networks. Because if the network is not being paid for, or if the service is not being paid for at its true cost, then we don't have a sustainable system.
But Rory, some would argue that that's a public service function. My taxes in the consolidated fund should be providing rural water, wherever it is, Katavi, wherever. Yeah. Aren't you sort of meddling in the public provision, in the provision of public services? Do you ever get any pushback?
We certainly do get pushback, yes. And I think that's probably one, I would say our biggest challenge as we stand today is the, let's say, the environment to create the opportunity for us to demonstrate that it can be done. You know, there's obviously a lot of sensitivity around price of water.
Yeah.
And I do think it's important to define, you know, to differentiate cost of water and cost of delivery. Water itself can be free as a commodity, that's not an issue. But the delivery of that water has a legitimate cost, and that's what we really need to focus on. So I think the challenges that we face are around the sort of lack of policy currently in terms of tariff, you know, legitimate tariff pricing that's set based on realistic data. And part of that is also just, it arises out of the inability to collect that data efficiently historically. That shouldn't be the case now. You know, the technology exists there to be able to monitor the cost of an entire system. And I think what we find ourselves right now doing is spending a considerable amount of time trying to, let's say, justify why we need to do some of these projects in order to demonstrate that it can work. I think your comment about, are we, you know, is it the role of the public sector? Absolutely, it is. But the reality is that the water and the wash requirements at a national level are huge.
Yeah.
You know, we've looked at the numbers today. We require 6-point-something billion to do the next phase.
Indeed.
So I think organizations like ours and many of the panelists here have a role to play in being able to be a small cog within the wheels of making these things happen. And if we can demonstrate that it can be done, then the next step is to look at, okay, how do we scale that now to a national level?
Indeed, I want to challenge a little bit the two gentlemen sitting at that high table over there. You mentioned, Nathan, this is your own fault, $6 billion. And then you're going to sign an agreement for 300 million. It seems disproportionately small. The need is huge. How do we close that gap? And engineer, how do we work together? So there's government, there's development partners, there's private sector over here, there's NGOs like Engineer Wilhelmina. How do we close that gap? 6 billion, 300 million, where does the difference come in order to be able to achieve those fantastic things that we want to achieve that are outlined in this report? I'll start with you, Nathan. What do you think? Is it good enough?
Thank you.
Okay.
I really appreciate for that. Actually, the needed amount is estimated about 6.5 billion US dollar. The commitment we have is about 1.8 billion US dollar.
This is government commitment?
No.
Or development
it's
partners?
A combination of government and the development partners. And larger portion is taken by the World Bank. So the government commitments around the 400 million US dollar, and the development partners commitment is about 1.4 billion US dollar. So for that, you may note that our larger prayer, or the big portion of the support we are getting, is from the development partners. And this is our main message for today for you all to take, that we still have a big gap and we really need your support. And we should also focus not only for the Tanzania mainland, we also have Zanzibar, as Dr. Abraham said. We have the Zanzibar Water Investment Program document. It is already prepared. They have substantial amount which is also needed for the Zanzibar case. We've been talking of the Tanzania mainland, but we should also look at the Zanzibar case. So in the mainland, we have the Water Sector Development Program Phase 3, but in Zanzibar, we have the Zanzibar Water Investment Program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nathan, you're not getting off the hook.
I was hoping I could ride off of the PS's comments, but so I think this is a very important point that you raise. Let me try and respond to it twofold. First, on the question of sufficiency of financing. My view is that the financing that we and other development partners sort of put on the table alongside the government should not be seen as the totality of financing, but rather as a mechanism by which to initiate the work, but more importantly, to leverage financing, right? There's simply no way that the government, through the revenues generated from taxes, can support their investment programs. Therefore, it's really critical to leverage. How do you leverage? It's by bringing in private partners, by seeing how you can identify where to prioritize your resources, meaning in areas where it can be commercially viable, let the private sector do that, where areas where it cannot be, in rural areas, etc., in remote areas, that it's 100% public. So I think that's the first part. The second part, and I would say equally important or potentially even more important, is the efficiency of spending. It doesn't matter how much money you put in, if it's not efficiently spent, then you're not going to have any traction whatsoever. So I think that we should not just be focused on sort of fundraising, but really priority should be placed on looking at the fact that we have good public policies and the way in which the money is utilized is really being maximized to its fullest. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Nathan. I think one of the things that I'm taking away from this, just reading the equity implications, the gender implications of the lack of water and sanitation, I think one of the most efficient ways to spend any money that you raise is to reduce the cost to women and girls and children of poor access to water. As men, there's a very interesting statistic in here that women in markets spend 18 times more on accessing toilets than they pay in taxes at that market. 18 times more. That is an incredible waste of energy, I think. Let's come to you, Dr. Ibrahim, and then I'm going to open it up. Any questions over there? I don't see any hands. Are you all mesmerized by this water conversation? I see a hand over there, and another one over here. Okay, we'll go with Dr. Ibrahim, and then I'll come to you, ma'am, and another hand over here. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Aiden. Over the last few days, I was interested in understanding the economics around water. And basically, what I'm increasingly finding out is, as public health professionals, I think we have defined adequately the rationale behind the benefit of having water, sanitation, and hygiene. It's a very clearly established link between health and hygiene, health and water. There is no doubt. I think what we are failing to define is the cost benefit and the cost, a capital investment required to justify investing in WASH. And that is where the businessman is interested, because the businessman will always want to put money where they leverage the return on investment.
Right.
And unless you have the right mathematics as presented by the World Bank economist, who was fast, the businessman will always be very scared. It is called the Sun Index. They are not comfortable in investing in certain places. But I think data is now coming through. My call is for us as water specialists, as health specialists, as engineers, to begin joining hands with economists and give them the right information on the key parameters in terms of investment. Because there's a lot of cloud around capital investment and how this one will trade off to give profit to whoever wants to put money in the sector.
Right.
That is a very raw area where science is really required. But at least what I'm convinced about as a public health specialist is water and sanitation and hygiene is a public good. We will never run away from it being subsidized. It's like an immunization program. We dare to convince a certain population of people to get herd immunity to protect the others.
Right.
So we invest in a few to protect the entire population. That's the public good. So water, sanitation, and hygiene, in a way, will always remain a public good. And therefore, investing in it through certain processes where we don't necessarily mean that we are going to leverage 100% profit back, That is an issue that we have to go with. So we have to work with the business community, actually to support them, to ensure that they can bring in technology, bring in management skills, and be able to advise us, but support them to do it with the knowledge that water, sanitation, and hygiene are public commodities. If you have proper sanitation, you reduce spread of infection. If you have proper sanitation and hygiene, you have better school attendance for girls. Everything about water is about the public.
Right.
Recently, we have COVID. Just washing your hands, the message said, you will protect yourself, you will protect the public. So you can see the inbuilt strength of water, sanitation, and hygiene in public interest. So we shouldn't shy away from subsidizing certain costs where we don't necessarily expect profit because water is a public good.
Thank you. You need to talk to Rory after this. Make the case for the private sector. So I saw a hand. Sorry, madam. I saw your hand first, and then another hand over there. So just quick introduction and a short question or comment. No more than a minute. Please go ahead, and then we'll come over here. And then a third hand I see over here. Please go ahead.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
My name is Annette Noah Moipiana. I'm the Deputy CEO of Economic Society of Tanzania. So I had few perspectives to contribute. First, we have demand of water in Tanzania and Zanzibar. So actually, I would like to see like the chart, which has, you know, all regions have demand, but actually there are some regions which have highly demand and others like Dar es Salaam, at least we are doing good. So I would like at least all of us, we can have the clear view of the demand in regions which are in need of water and water hygiene and sanitation. And also I have another perspectives on water, sanitation, and hygiene. Like until now, we have, especially example in Dar es Salaam, we have availability of water in most of the places, but yet we have a problem of water, sanitation, hygiene. Like if we see on the water flow, some of the places have like dirty water. Yes, we have water, but some of the places have dirty water or brown water, I can say, you know. So like, yet we will be supplying water in other places that do not have water, but we need, because most of the people, they drink water without, most of the percent without even sanitizing it or boiling it or putting some chemicals so as it can purify water. So that is the problem, because we can face diarrhea, cholera, and other diseases. So I think I wanted to contribute that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. That's part of the report. Says the cost of that is 31,000 premature deaths, 2.1 billion, 2.6 billion in lost, productivity. It's very, very expensive. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hello.
I'd like to move here. So my name is Adamson Nsimba. I work with the new management at Tanzania Association of NGOs, Tango. I just have one question. I was moved by the one line that said we should be more resilient, we should be more inclusive, and the issue
sustainable.
Exactly. So I was just seated there trying to ask. Dr. Ibrahim started talking about issues of collaboration and such things. So I was curious to ask, what do you think the civil societies can do, to broaden the efforts that are already being done, for sustainability of the efforts that the World Bank is doing, the government. So I was curious on that. I'm looking for that niche. You started going there, but and then you moved away. So
we wanted to talk about private sector.
Yeah, I would like to go out with something of that sort.
Engineer Wilhelmina, you'll have to answer that question. What can civil society do? And another one here, madam. Maybe I'll just bring my microphone. Yes, it'll be faster for me to come there. Yes. They can't see you.
Okay, my name is Winifrida Shonde, Environmental Ambassador and the Vice President Office I'm also environmental consultant and vice chairman of TEA, Tanzania Environmental Expert Association. For my contribution, I have 3 things which I think maybe can help. Number 1, if we induce this knowledge and spirit to the students from schools, from kindergarten, let's make this student understand the importance of water and how to make it as a thing for their future generation. So I think if we do this in the schools, it will help much, and it will be a simple and faster roadmap.
Right.
Number 2, as environmental experts, we encourage investors to do environmental impact assessment to their projects before initiation of any project. One of the things which they have to put as a priority and put a budget on their project, if any investor, anyone in the country will put a single budget for that item of water, I'm sure that we are going to make it as the first and to meet the target. And number 3, and the last one, is just involvement, community awareness, and make sure that everyone is aware, and we accept the knowledge, and we give this task to everybody to own. We say that it's a public goods, nobody owns. Let's make them, everybody own it, and to make issue to be simple and fast on the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good points. Wanakaposo, you talk about your behavioral change. You know, she's talking about children, investors investing, and it's everybody's issue. Before you come, one final comment from the floor, way at the back over there. I can see a hand back there. Yes.
Yeah, thanks so much. My name is Victor Congo, Executive Director, Global Water Partnership, Tanzania. Thanks for such wonderful contributions from the panelists. There's one thing that I didn't hear, water resources management.
Water what management?
Water resources management.
Water resources management.
Yeah, we are busy using, but we are not managing. So all the discussions there was wash, sanitation, pipes. But of course, we are all witnesses of Dar es Salaam. Last year, and even the other year, we were all having challenges of water in Dar es Salaam because we have only one source of water. But because of mismanagement upstream, that's why we ended up there. So how can you also invest in water resources management? So that's one key. Another one is, I think it's high time we establish the economic contribution of water. No, the contribution of water into the economy. Because that's why the politicians want to know. I think agricultural sector have done well, mining have done well. Like maybe water contributes 10% to the GDP. Of course, it's a complex process.
Yeah.
But I think we should not shy away from undertaking difficult assignments because that's the real world. Thank you so much.
I agree with you. Let me just agree with you because I think we talk about tourism. The World Bank has talked about the digital economy. We, civil society organizations, argued the case for civil society, contribution to the economy. Engineer, you need to hire some economists, Engineer Sanga, to make the case for how important water is to the exchequer. Let me tell you, your budget will increase tomorrow. I'm sure of it. So let's come back to the panel. Lots of comments and questions from the floor. I'll start with Engineer Wilhelmina. What is the contribution? Where is the niche for civil society in making sure that we achieve these targets that we're having?
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe before going to that, could you allow me to kind of look at these questions?
Yes.
Yes, there was a first question talking about unsafe water from the ground. Just wanted to talk a little bit. Yes, we encourage treating, especially for drinking water, for any water that is coming from the pipe, from any source, because of the matter or the challenge that could change the quality of water because of handling practices. So even with groundwater in Dar es Salaam from the boreholes, we believe it's safe because drilling should go with the treatment and measuring or checking the quality of that water that would be supplied. So not necessarily that water coming from the ground or from the wells it's unsafe. I mean, the practice is for everything. Handling is very important. Safe